Hi, this is Mark from ITCU Solutions, and today I want to go over how to set up a network lab. And I'm going to use VMware for my hypervisor in this situation. The reason is I have a lot of clients that are using Hyper-V, and I think part of the reason they're using it is they don't understand how to set up the network part of VMware. So I thought I'd go over this just to help them out. And I'm also setting it up in this configuration where I basically have two Dell servers connecting through a switch to a NAS, because this is similar to the way if you had a third party come in and set up a VMware stack for you, it'd be set up. Of course, it would have more redundancy. They'd have two switches, and they would probably be setting up stuff like port channel to get that redundancy. But we're going to keep it simple today, and we're going to set this up, but the idea will basically be the same, even though we're using a NAS, and the performance on this for a lab will work fine, even though we're using a NAS instead of a SAN. So let's get started. We're going to go through these 7 steps up here. We're going to create a bootable USB drive so we can install the ESXi software. And then we're going to go through and configure our network components and create the volume on the NAS so we can set up our SCSI targets and the data store, and then finally install the guest OS. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is go to the Rufus website, which I already have up. It says rufus.ie. And when you get there, just scroll down, and we're just going to download the very first standard because we're using Windows in this case. So we're going to download the Windows 64. And I've already downloaded this, so just click on it and it will download. And then the second thing we need to do is actually go get the ESXi software. So here, just go to vmware.com. We just need to log in to our Customer Connect login site, and you're probably going to need to create an account because you're also going to need a license key when you do this. So you'll get a free license key. This is all free. Okay. Okay, so we're just going to go right to all products. And then just scroll down to the hypervisor, the vSphere ESXi host. View download components. Click on download. Okay, just remember you're going to need to grab this license key, so cut and paste it into a notepad or something along those lines. Now, I've already downloaded the software because I didn't want to waste the time doing that on the video. So we'll just jump into now actually creating the USB with Rufus. So let me open Rufus up here. And I have a USB drive installed on the F drive. So we'll just select our VMware image. Now just remember, I'm using the older MBR on this because I'm using Rufus. So when we go into set up the actual VMware stuff, we're going to have to make sure we adjust our BIOS so it'll accept this. Okay. So we're just going to click through that. We're just going to create the bootable USB drive real quick. In fact, I might pause it till it completes here. I'll pause the video while I'm waiting for this. Okay, our bootable USB has been completed, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to pause the video again in a second. So I'm going to go plug in the USB drive into this Dell R330, and I'm going to configure it to be 10.10.10.52. Just give me a second, I'm going to pause the video and I'll run over and plug this in, and then we'll look how to install it. Okay, so I did get the USB drive in there and we just booted into the VMware ESXi installer. I did have to change the boot order, so that's something you might have to do. And this is the first thing, part of the menu that you'll have to do anything, so I'm just going to hit continue. And we're just going to accept the agreement. There's not much to installing this. And then I'm just going to pick a location. I have a couple local drives in here, so I'm just going to pick them. For installation. And because this had a previous version of VRM, I'm just going to go through and do a complete fresh install. So we're going to overwrite any old virtual machines or any other data that might have been on here. And we're just going to use all the defaults and add your password. And we're just going to install it. And I'll pause the video again while I'm waiting for this to install, because I think it's going to take a little while. Okay, the ESXi host completed the installation, so now we're just going to tell it to reboot. And I will actually pause the video again while it's rebooting, but it should now come up ready for us to configure it. Okay, our system is rebooted, and now we just need to go in and configure the network settings on it. So I'm going to log into it, choose the password you set when you're installing it, and then we just need to go down and configure your managed network. We're just going to use IPv4. And I'm going to put it on my 10 network. And if you remember right from the drawing, we're going to do the bottom virtual machine, which is this. So we're going to do 10.10.10.52 because this is going to become my vmix 0 NIC interface. So let's go back to that. Oops, sorry, wrong screen. Our gateway is going to be 10.10.10.1 to get to the router that I've already set up. Okay. And this basically should be all we have to do at this time. Okay. Now I just want to make sure that I can ping this guy. Perfect. And then we'll validate that we can log in. And there we go. Okay, so now we have our VMware host set up and all installed. So let's go back to our diagram here. So we've completed the first two things we want to do. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually set up our network components. So I'll do that on the VMware side first. And so what I'm going to do is, remember, port groups and VLANs are kind of synonymous. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a port group for these guys. We're also going to set up a new virtual switch called ESXi or VESXi, and that will allow us to connect back and set up our drives. So let's do that real quick. Okay. So we want to go to networking. And we're going to start with our port groups. And we're just going to add a new one, and we're just going to call this virtual SCSI. Switch name. Okay, and we want, and in my network I only have 1 gigabit interface, so we definitely want that to be on the part that's going to access the ESXi. And we don't have to change any of these other things because they're by default they're set up the way we want them. So we have our virtual switch set up. Okay, here's our, just to show what we have. This, I want to make sure that this physical interface is what's connecting back to my NAS. The rest I don't really care about. We're just using a lab environment, so we just want to make sure that our VMNIC 1 is what connects back. So we want that to be gigabit. Okay, so we'll go back and set up our port groups. So we're just going to add one here. In fact, I'm going to change the name on this guy, I think. So we'll go to edit settings. And we'll call him network 10.1.1.0. And the VLAN ID on that, I believe, was 2, but let me verify that. VLAN 2 and 3, okay. So we want our VLAN ID to be 2. We're not going to be doing any NIC teaming. If we were doing the redundancy, we would do that. And we're not going to do any security since it's just a lab. So I'll create our first port group, or first port group we can do. Then we'll add our second one. We'll just call it 10.2.2.0. That's VLAN 3. And see, we're also putting these all in our original virtual switch that was created, because this is going to be used for our Ghost OSs. Okay, that's the virtual switch right here, vSwitch 0. You can see I'm adding my port groups. Okay, so we'll add that one. So we're done with the port groups for vSwitch 0. We need to add one now for our ESXi. And I just want to see what I called it. Okay, I didn't call it anything there. So we'll just call it ESXi. Keep it simple. Now, I'm going to leave the VLAN ID to 0, but you might want to set up a trunk if, for example, I wanted to connect additional NASs in here, like I didn't have enough storage. Let's say you have a couple small NAS servers. You might want to set this up as a trunk in that case, because when you use a switch and you send it all to the same VLAN, of course that traffic will end up on both, so it would degrade your performance a little bit. So if in the future or now you want to use smaller NASs, you can do that. You can put your targets on as many NASs as you want. But if you do that, you probably want to set up, this isn't going to be a trunk. You probably want to set that up, this link back up as a trunk, so you can send only the traffic to the proper NAS that you're doing that with. But in my case, we're just going to send it all to VLAN 100 on this switch, and it will just route the traffic over to the only target I have. That's why we're setting this up as 0. And this time, we need to use the ESXi VLAN switch that you see right here. This is all virtual. Okay. Okay. So, oh, and we need to change the VLAN ID of my management network as well. He's going to be on 10. Okay. Now I probably just lost, I did. So I just lost my connectivity because I changed this interface, this uplink here. So now in order for my switch to understand this, this needs to be set up as a trunk link, and it currently is not. So this is all set up. I just basically converted this to a trunk. So now I need to do the same thing here. So I'm going to log into 10.10.10.2. So let's just do putty here. And this is an ancient switch, so I have to use telnet. Okay. And so luckily I have it labeled here. So on Ethernet 3, I will now change this to a trunk. Oops, what am I doing? Okay. And since in the future I'm also going to do this with 4 for the other, well, I'll wait. Okay. So now port 3, which is that connection, should now be set to a trunk, which is what I want. And I also have to make sure I have all my VLANs. I already pre-created these, but you need to do the same thing. So I have VLAN 2, 3, and 10 all created, so that it will recognize those tags on that trunk. Okay. So now, in theory, I should be able to get back to the connection here. Okay. And we can. So we'll come back to our network. Okay. So the last thing that, if you look at our diagram, so we went through and we basically set up our VLANs for this, and you can see that's working because I changed this port to a trunk, and this is actually port 3. So we know this guy's working. We have our VLAN set up here. We have this set for a trunk. We have our VLANs inside the switch as well. So our network works. Okay, oops, sorry. It's down here. So we know this is working. We have this guy set up as well. But I don't have the switch set up and I don't have the NAS set up. I need to go in because I don't want to use, I could use VLAN 1, but I'm going to set them, I have this called VLAN 100, which it really isn't. We could just use VLAN 1, but I'm going to change them all to VLAN 100 and then also come in and set up the NAS. So this will have connectivity. Also, I have to set up my VMK1 because I'm going to have a ESXi target over here on the 10.10.100 network. So let's set up our VMK1 real quick, and then we'll go in and we'll set up the switch. Okay, so let's add a VM kernel, and we'll just call it let's see, we need to use ESXi for all this. Oops. And we need to use static. And we want to use the default TCP IP stack. We don't want to use the vMotion or provisioning stack, because if you use one of these stacks, you're not going to be able, without a lot of additional configuration, this will put it on a separate TCP IP stack. So by default, it won't be able to see the rest. This guy won't be able to see what's going on over here because they'll be on separate IP stacks if you put it on the vMotion stack. If you want to do that type of segregation, you can, but it requires a lot more configuration, so we just want to keep everything on the default stack for now. Okay, so we're going to stick on the default stack. We can add vMotion as a service if we plan on using that, but the main thing is we have to go in here and configure this IP address. Oops. So it's going to be 10, 10, 100. I believe it was .2. Yep. And I'm just using a Class C network for everything. Okay, so we're good to go there. That will allow us, that will give us a interface that we can connect to our ESXi target later on. So we've basically completed all the configuration on the network side for this. Now we'll go configure the switch. And it's all the setup for VLAN 1 except for my management interface. So all I'm going to do is go in and throw in an interface range command. I don't need to do all these interfaces, but I'm just going to keep it simple. And I'm just going to set them up all for VLAN 100. Oops. And I'm also just going to add port fast to speed this up. Okay. So I'm not really doing much with this switch. I just wanted to make sure again that everything's on VLAN 100 because that's kind of the nomenclature. I could have used VLAN 1. It wouldn't have hurt anything. And also, like I said before, if you do want to add additional NASs out here because you don't have enough storage or whatever's going on, I would convert this link to a trunk and put them actually on separate VLANs just so you don't flood all the traffic to both interfaces when you do that. Okay, so this switch is now all configured as well. That's all we had to do. So now we'll just go into the Colorado and configure it. That's not even close. What am I doing? Okay. Let's see. It should let me click through. Oh, I know what we'll do. Now I'm using ancient equipment and it performs well. That's why I'm having some of these errors. So you don't have to spend a lot to set up this lab. You can go on eBay and buy kind of junky stuff. I got a lot of this equipment from clients that were just basically going to throw it out because it no longer has the performance they want. But you can also use any NAS you want. You can use a QNAP, you can use a Drobo, you can use a Synology. They all work fine. I've used them all in the past. Whatever is most economical for a lab, they'll work great. The biggest thing is just making sure you have enough memory on your servers and enough CPUs cores on your servers. Okay, so for this guy, I already have LVM turned on because I'm running a RAID 5, so I don't have to do anything with that. But we're going to go in here and turn on our ESXi. Okay, and actually, I'm going to set up the network first. I'll turn that on, but we'll set up the network first because we need to put our secondary interface on this 1010-100 network, or the interface that's connecting into the switch. So we'll just go into port 2. I have it wrong on the drawing, so we'll get rid of the DHCP. And we'll make it .4. Whoops. Okay. We don't have to worry about DNS or anything because this is just a connection to effectively add a hard drive to our ESXi host. And we'll give it a second here. Okay. Okay, so we got that done, and we'll go back in to our drives, and we'll set up our ESXi volumes. And you're going to create a volume for every virtual machine that you set up. So in my case, I'm just going to call this customer DC3 or something. Say it's a domain controller. You can add volume description. Domain controller. Okay. I don't really need a whole lot, so we'll just say it's 128 gig drive for DC. And I'm not going to turn on authentication. Okay. Now you would normally just, like if I wanted a second DC controller or a file server, you should go in and create those volumes on here. And like I said, you could do this over multiple NASs. You could have the volumes on multiple NASs if you have like a couple old Synologies that only have a couple terabytes on them or something like that. So we'll let this guy finish up. And while that's finishing up, we're just on step 4 here. We configure the network components, including the virtual switch. I think the one thing I forgot to do is I didn't go create the sub interfaces on the router, but we'll do that just a second. And those will all be completed, and then we'll go on to set up the ESXi targets. So while this is still creating the volume, I'm going to jump in to the router. Okay, so he created the our target we need, and like I said, we could put in multiple on here. You don't have to keep track of this because we're not going to be setting up the target statically. You should be able to just go and dynamically discover them. So while we're doing that, I'm just going to make sure I have a gateway for VLAN 2 and VLAN 3. Okay, so I actually already did put in one for 3 but not 2, so we'll add that. Probably because I'm only gonna set up one server, but this will be for VLAN 2. And of course, if you have a layer 3 switch, you don't have to do this. I'm using router on the stick. You could be doing it all on the same device. So, okay, so we have all of our network components are configured now. We have our volumes created on the NAS. So now we can go in and set up the ESXi targets and then set up our data store. So we just need to go back to our VMware host. And now we just need to go to storage. Okay, we need to go to adapters because that's where our targets are going to be located. Okay, and then we need to actually enable the ESXi. Give it a sec here. Okay. Then we need to bind it to the proper target. This was that VMK interface we set up earlier, so our target, our ESXi, could find the ESXi targets. So we'll select that, and then we're going to ignore the static targets for now because we should be able to dynamically find those. So let's see, 1010. I think I made it .4. Hit save configuration. Okay, so you'll see our static targets automatically populated, so that's good. Okay, so we have our targets, everything looks good. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is just go set up our a data store for our new server. Oh, it's not showing up. Sees it. I might have to reboot here again, so I might pause to reboot my VMware server. Sometimes this happens. Okay, I'm gonna reboot this guy. See if he picks it up. And then I will pause the video. while we're waiting for this. Okay, the ESXi host has rebooted, so we'll log back in. Hopefully we'll see the if we go to storage, well actually we gotta get out of maintenance mode. Okay, let's go back to storage. Okay, so now we see our ESXi software adapter, which wasn't showing up before. So you should be able to go to, and it's saying normal degraded because I don't have 2 uplinks. So we should be able to add our data store now. And we'll call it the same thing we had on the other one. It was customer DC3, I believe, something like that. And we'll just use the whole 128 gigs. And we're going to use the full disk. Okay. Okay, so now what we've done is we've basically set up, okay, so we have customer DC3 showing up in the data store now. So now if we go back, what we've done is we've basically attached this Colorado as a hard drive to our Dell 330 down here, and we went through and we set up all the networking and all that stuff. So everything has been done except for installing our guest OS. So the next step that we'll do here is do that, and it'll be quite simple as long as all this other has been configured correctly. So we just have to go to virtual machines, and then we just have to create one. Create a new virtual machine, and we'll call it customer. We'll keep all the names the same. And it's going to be Windows. It's going to be a domain controller. And I have a 2019 ISO. Okay, we'll do it here. And usually I have 32 gigs of memory on these 330s. So I usually give each machine server about 8 megs. That tends to seem to be enough. I'm sorry, 8 gigs per server. That seems to be enough for everything to function properly, and also 2 CPUs seems to be enough. This seems performance-wise, so that'd be what I recommend. That's why you should probably have at least 32 gigs on your server. That would give you up to 4 VMs if you do that. The other thing is you can just load the VMs on both your servers, so I can have up to 8. I can't manually migrate those though if I do that without basically either exporting and saving or deleting the old VMs, like if I want to upgrade to a new ESXi host. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to grab the data store ISO file. And let's see here. We're going to have to upload an image here. So we should have one here. Do I have an ISO here? Oh, wait. I'm not doing what I'm doing. I might have to pause and go find where my ISO file is located. Okay, let me pause. I'll go look for it. Give me 1 sec. Okay, I found the ISO image. So it's a Windows 2019 ISO image. So we're just going to upload that. And this is going to take a little while, so I'm actually going to pause again just till it finishes uploading. So I'll be right back. Okay, the ISO image has been uploaded, so I just selected it. I'm going to hit select it, so we're going to select it. And hit next. Finish. Okay. So then all you have to do to install Windows is literally just click on the image itself. And power it on. Oh, I forgot. I have this set up as MBS, so this isn't going to work. So we have to go into VM options real quick and go into your boot options. Because we can't use secure boot because I'm using the older MBS master boot. So we turn that off. Oops. I hope I turn it off. Okay. Let me go back and check again. Power them off real quick. Okay. Let's try that again. Timed out. Okay, why is it still? Okay. Huh. All right, I'm gonna pause the video for a second to see why this is having a problem. Okay, I got it to work. I don't know why I didn't see this before, but all that was wrong is when I went into settings, into VM options, somehow I missed choose which firmware should be used. I need to use BIOS. That's what I was talking about. These are older devices, so I have to use the older type of options. So we'll just verify now that it should just start loading for itself, and it does. And it'll start installing the OS here. Okay, next. Install now. Okay, I'm going to pause again just for a second so I can put in the key and finish the installation. Okay, I got the Windows Server 2019 installed, and I just logged in for the first time. And I just want to show you all that this is working properly, but the one thing I want to do real quick is go back to the networking page and just remind you of which port group. Remember, I'm on the 10110 port group, so that's VLAN 2, so I have to configure my NIC to be on the 10110 network. Okay, so if we go back and look, that's one of my groups, and excuse me, on the virtual machine I had it, I could go look, but on the virtual I had this port group selected. So that means if we go in here, come on. We should be able to go in. Oops. To the 1.1 network. Give myself an IP. Okay, because my traffic once leaving now is being tagged on VLAN 2, so I should be able to hit my gateway. And there you go. So everything's working fine. I just think the key is when people set up VMware is to draw a picture so you can see virtually what's going on. So what I did in this case is I took this server and I basically plugged it in to this port group. So this is our customer DC3 server. So I basically dropped it here, I plugged it into this port group, and so the traffic that's coming off of him, because I selected that port group for my interface, is getting connected through into the virtual switch to the uplink, and it is tagged as VLAN 2 into my switch. So this is all you guys have to do to set up a VMware lab. I'll probably do a second video to show you how you can go in and use VRFs and VLANs and some other things and some virtual systems on a Fortinet firewall to show you how you can completely segment out the traffic. You have different customers, but that will be for a future video. And I hope this is useful to someone out there, whether they're using it for home or for business. And I think this is a good way to set up your lab because it does kind of mirror the way an actual VM stack would be set up. I hope you guys have a great day.